So, welcome everybody to a very, very special episode of Legends and Lectures, and we're going to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart. And for that, we have a very special guest with us to do so. And at the time of recording, we just passed the 42nd birthday of the NES or the Famicom. And happy Donkey Kong Bonanza Day to all those who celebrate. Danny, are you celebrating Donkey Kong Bonanza Day?
I don't have a Switch too, Michelle. Would you believe?
Oh no, I believe it is $650 in Canada,
Canada.
and that's before tax.
Woof.
So I would get one and then have no games for the foreseeable future. So it's not worth it for me at the moment, but it will be, and I'm very excited to get one whenever that happens because we know Nintendo doesn't bring down their prices. And
Right.
in general, but a happy 44 to my boy. I got my Donkey Kongs out for those who are looking at them. Happy 44 to him. Happy 44 to Pauline,
Absolutely.
who aged in reverse.
And was abandoned by the franchise, by the company. Although no, she'll be in the new Donkey Kong, obviously, right? She's
She
probably
is, yeah,
the
she's the little girl
yeah.
in the new one.
There you
Um,
go.
and she's also she was in New Donk City in Mario Odyssey. She was the singer.
New Donk City. How does Nintendo get away with that? New
That's
Donk City. We all just accepted it.
well,
It's a
where
great name.
else where else did the Donkey Kongs come from? They need to come
New
from somewhere.
Donk City. Yeah, I don't know.
And also 44 technically to Mario because his first appearance was in Donkey Kong. So
It's where it all
Danny,
began. You a
yeah,
big
that's
Nintendo head then? Is that what we're learning from this?
we're going to talk about a little bit of the history of Nintendo. But Danny, but first, I want you to, for those who don't know, I think everybody in the gaming space must know you.
Oh, hopefully
So
not.
before, or at least they know your channel for sure. I think everybody knows what NoClip is. So would you please tell people yourself, NoClip, and how you came to be in the gaming space?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on. I feel like the least qualified person who's ever been on this podcast. I'm not an academic. I did not enjoy my time in college, and I'm not well learned on history or even mythology. I mean, we talked for 20 minutes about Irish mythology
That's
before
right.
we came on, and it's great to have a chat about Irish mythology as an Irish person where you are the
But
lesser informed person.
everybody learned a little bit about Irish mythology when they played Elden Ring, did they not?
Oh, we hoped so much. I remember when that trailer came out, and I was like, "Is
Is
that
that
Tuatha De
Colin?
Danann? Is that
Yeah.
exactly? Is that the Hound? Like, please, like, yeah. That
But it
such
is.
is
I
the
mean,
desire,
Melania has the hand of Nemed, right? So
right? Yeah, that's the thing. It was like wish fulfillment. We were trying to cross it over there. One day we will. I mean, George, he likes to pick from Irish mythology here and there, I feel like.
oh yeah.
Um, but alas, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the wonderful world of video games, which in the future will be a mythology. And I guess perhaps, unfortunately, within my lifetime might also be as well.
No, you know
Um,
what though? I mean, but as for because since you're wondering why you're here, this is part of cultural studies, and there are media studies, and now video games is part of media studies as well. There, you can major in video games in college now, so
right.
it is part of this is an interdisciplinary subjects podcast, and cultural studies is part of that, and the history of video games is a serious study.
There you go. I feel, thank you. Now I feel like I deserve to be here a little bit more. So I appreciate it, Michelle. Anyway, my name is Danny O'Dwyer. I run a YouTube channel called NoClip, which is basically all about documenting the world of video game design, primarily video game development. So we fly around the world talking to game developers of all shapes and sizes, massive teams to individual folks, AAA games to free indie stuff, and basically talk about process. We talk about the process of making games. We try to talk to as many folks as possible on the teams, and the way I like to describe it to people is like the what it is sort of the special features you used to get on DVDs, like where the behind the scenes video that you watch after you watch the movie. And then in terms of sort of what our mission is, it's really at least originally we're almost around 9 years now. It was to sort of create a deeper understanding within games discourse, I guess, about the challenges that developers face and just how difficult and specialized the work is. Because for the longest time, being online and talking about games, you had a lot of armchair quarterbacks in the video game discourse,
Has it
and
changed though?
that's the thing. I don't know if that has changed. I feel like there's always new recruits coming into that, but I definitely feel like, and I'm not saying that this is us that did this. I think maybe we were sort of ahead of the wave a bit, but I don't think we instigated it. But I do think that there are a lot more developers out there now talking about process, and I do think that the audience, at least the sort of hardcore audience, now knows a lot more than they did, 15 years ago for sure. So it's definitely changed a bit. Like we've had to approach our documentaries differently because people are smarter, and that's good to know. But yeah, I think you're right. I think there will always be people saying the most reductive thing, like, oh, why didn't they just like fix this tiny thing in the game, and like, oh, that would have taken like 6 months and $10 million.
Graphics are the
But
first thing decided on.
right, exactly, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So it's yeah, so it's fun. It's I love my job. I get to talk to people who are way smarter than me about the job they do, and that's and that's what I love. So it's great.
So after interviewing so many people and being in the gaming space for so long, because No Clip is not your first adventure. You've been here a long time.
Less long than I would have liked because it took me a long time to break in. I was 27 when I got my job at GameSpot UK, which now seems really young, but I remember being a thirsty college graduate and getting a job interview with them when I was 22 in Ireland, and actually flew me to London for the job interview, and then I didn't end up getting it, and I was like, oh, they must think I'm a country bumpkin, so I got to move to London. So I lived in London for 5 years, waiting to get a gig. And then eventually, it was right when I was moving away from London to live in the Middle East with my then partner. That I got an email about 3 weeks before we were leaving. It was the day all of the stuff got picked up from the moving truck to go back to Ireland. And they were like, we have a job for you. So, yeah.
Cancel, cancel.
Yeah, can't basically. Yeah. Well, she went to the Middle East, and that's why I said ex-partner. So, I that was the drive I had to break in, I guess, for a long time, and I ran a very silly, um, uh, uh, what would you call it? Like I guess a blog, or it was a website I built because my degree is in web design, multimedia applications development or whatever. But I built this website called Citizen Game, which is the most cringy
So
title of all time.
GeoCities, I love it.
Oh
Amazing.
my Lord.
I love it.
But one of the folks who worked on that ended up working in video games marketing for years. One of the guys who wrote on it is the editor of GameSpot right now, Timur Hussein, who I met on the forums. So we ended up doing well, I think, the group of us who worked on that thing. But yeah, I worked at GameSpot for 5 years basically before No
The
Clip. And
OG days were crazy. I used to write game guides back in the day.
oh
And
yeah,
remember Game Facts? Well, I mean,
absolutely,
they're still around. There was also Neo Yeah, so
man.
I would write like tips and stuff like that way back when it worked for EB Games.
GameFAQs was like a significant portion of because GameFAQs got molded into GameSpot's
Yeah.
like web backend, and the reason for that was a significant amount of traffic was going to GameFAQs for a very long time. Like this was before I think I guess maybe fandom sort of all their guides, and I think just the internet changed. But for a while there,
Mhm.
GameFAQs was like the number one place you would hit. So GameSpot needed that traffic, so we basically took it underneath the wing of GameSpot, which I found very funny. All user
I was long
generated,
gone before then. I only ever did tips here and there,
What
honestly.
games?
I did some tips for Dragon Quest 8 back in the day,
Nice.
which I have a tattoo of.
Excellent.
Anything PS2. PS2 was my jam era, where that was where the era I was on the internet, where I was playing primarily PS2 and PC games. And
Right.
so I would write tips for those kinds of things, OG tips for Warcraft and that kind of thing. It,
Is that
it is an academic study, so it is.
I hope this isn't too personal a question. Is that the only video game tattoo you have?
Oh no, I've got a few, but
Oh, you do.
yeah.
Okay.
So here, I will show. So Danny, this is so I've got an Irish werewolf here. It says
Beautiful.
Fela and Ocham, and then I
Oh,
have
nice. Brilliant.
this one is from one of my books. Not very exciting, but the other ones I can't show. So I've got Dragon Quest here. I've got a symbol from a book, but also something that's mentioned in a Souls game here.
Oh, cool.
And I've got, if you want to say it's a video game, I say that they are still some of the best action games of all time, but I have the mix of the first and the third age tree that was put up in the two Lord of the Rings games.
Love it.
Yeah,
Absolutely love it.
yeah. But
We're
that
we're we're
that
we're we're joined then by the soul stuff. I have the hunter's mark there,
nice.
from Bloodborne, which is there because when my daughter was born, there was like she was maybe a month
Was there
old.
a blood moon in the sky and
I
did
now
did she come
yeah, the way she
down?
was born was real fucked up, let me tell you. Um, yeah, I had to like go crazy, and then she appeared to me. That the once I reached a certain level of madness.
That's what happens
Um,
when they turn 3.
yeah, yeah, God Almighty. Yeah, you're not wrong there. When she was like a month old, she there was a time where we had trouble with her sleeping, and she'd only sleep on my chest, and I was like, oh, and I was doing night shifts, right, so my wife could get
Hmm.
some sleep. So I was like, I got to play a game I've never played before. Like, what's a game that I've always wanted to play that I never
That's a
played
game to
before?
pick while you're trying to put your kid to
Get
sleep.
to sleep. So she used to sleep on my chest while I played Bloodborne, and she used to roll over to that part of my arm, so that was where her head would sleep. And I always say that like if she wasn't sleeping there because I couldn't move, I wouldn't have kept playing it. But I because I had to stay there and I had to, and then during the boss fights, I didn't want to be like standing up and raging, so she forced me to calm down because she was like literally asleep on my chest. I couldn't move, so that was like to me that was like a. They always say that like the mom bonds with the child like in utero, right? That's a process that they have for 9 months, and it often takes the other partner, time outside. It's to have that bonding moment. And for me, that was me meeting her like for the first time. So it's half a video game tattoo and half a tattoo of
So what you're
a
really
very
saying is children make you insane.
or better at video games. Who knows? She doesn't.
That
She's almost 7 now. She does not really play games at all. She watches me sometimes, but
and
yeah,
that's how long it's been since Bloodborne.
I
Oh,
know. Yeah, no, God, longer because that game was out like 4 years when I did that. So, uh-oh.
yeah, I know. We're all hoping for it. Who knows?
Yeah.
Uh, so saying that though, how would you define what a video game is?
Oh my Lord, that is such a good question because immediately you go towards what the sort of commercialized version of a video game is. And we've so many, like it's a very categorized area, like similar to music and film and stuff. Genre has allowed us to put up all these boxes for what they are.
I feel like
But
In the West, we have more of this idea of like categorized genre, whereas in the East, it's very different.
yeah, you get games like Boku no, which like I don't know what you'd put that in over here. In fact, most of the games that sort of defy characterization, I feel like do come from the East, because Europe is very similar in that respect as well. So I don't know. I mean, interactability being interactive is an essential part of it, obviously. I would almost say that the video like implies that some sort of visual is required, but then there are great games that don't do, like Sebastian Johann Bach and other games that are definitely video games, but they don't require a screen, so they fall into it as well. So I don't know. I think like the interactive part of it, and then what separates it from a piece of software, I guess, some sort of artistic intent, maybe, if
Hmm.
I'm trying to go as broadly as possible. I think every game, even the ones that are quite reductive, like a Call of Duty or whatever, they do have something to say. Not all what they say is equal, but I think that's probably the thing that separates them from pure software, which are, tools and utilities. I guess maybe the one that slips through the cracks then there is simulators, which are often games, but also sometimes not games. Like I play the Formula One video game, and I'm a big F1 fan, and I'll play things like iRacing, which is a simulator, but it's a game. But then is the simulator that the Formula One drivers use in between races, this multi-million-dollar simulator that is effectively mostly a video game, but it's not. Is that a game? Like I don't know if that's a game.
That's a
So
great question because
uh,
the original video games were essentially simulated. I mean, the term video game. was originally something that needed to transmit a video signal onto a viewable display.
Oh,
But
funny.
so this can, but doesn't always include things that, were CRTs, oscilloscopes, that kind of thing. But that means that this definition goes back to earlier stuff that precludes what we think of as games, and also includes things with like the LCD graphics, right? So like Game and Watch and stuff like that. But
Right.
that's not a video, but that's a display of some kind. Uh,
Yeah, and then you go to like things like early, dungeon crawler, adventure stuff, which is so clearly just a digital version of Dungeons and Dragons or fantasy novels, or where text adventures, like the text, like the interactability is there because you have to type things in,
mhm.
but essentially otherwise it's just a choose your own adventure book, you know what I mean? Like turn to page 11, like that type of thing.
And now we would call those maybe narrative games or narrative video games.
Right.
And there are
And
even people
because
who still call them computer. Like if you hear older people, they won't call them video games. They'll call them computer games
Oh
instead.
yeah, I called them computer games until I was I don't know, maybe an early teen or 12 or something like that, because my first machine was a Commodore Amiga, which was not a console. It was thought of as a computer, even though it wasn't really a computer. It kind of was a
Yeah, it
computer, but
was.
it
It
was,
was an early
yeah,
computer.
I
Absolutely. Yeah, for
guess,
sure.
yeah.
So what in your estimation then is the first video game?
I mean, a lot of people go back to, you mentioned oscilloscope, so a lot of people go back to Pong on like a submarine somewhere, right? Like as like the or t tennis or whatever it was, that
Ah,
two things knocking towards each other. Which I guess like that I don't know, an earlier version of the video aspect of it, or the interactiveness, I guess, now that I think about it, I guess that, because obviously there's like card games and chess and stuff, and that is an interactive thing. It just requires another human. So, um,
actually, there
I,
was there was a chess that was earlier than Pong, and the very first electronic game technically was in 1940. It was a display that was made at the World's Fair, and it played a
oh,
game of pickup sticks, and so people had to try to not be the last one to pick up the last stick, but it was an interactive display. So it was just a test, but then in 1947, Goldsmith and Mann, who were responsible for other things later on, they made the CRT, which had a simple shooting game in it that people could play. In the 1950s, then there was a chess and a tic-tac-toe and an XO, I guess the XOXO.
noughts and
Uh,
crosses, we'd
yeah,
say in
yeah, noughts and
Ireland. Yeah,
crosses. Yeah, exactly. That there was that, and then in 1962 was Stephen Russell's Space War.
right.
Um,
So that's
yeah.
amazing. So that's CRT. Or did they were they when you say they were shooting the CRT, were they using like sort of light gun technology on that thing, or
I don't
was
think
it?
so. There was a gun attachment, so I'm not exactly sure. You'd have to look up how Goldsmith and Mann actually did it, but they did use a CRT, and there was a gun attachment to it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but it wasn't a thing that you could buy, and you couldn't play it in an arcade. It was really just as a machine.
But
Um,
and that's what I love about that early era of that stuff, is that so much of it is just a digital obfuscation of a game that people were playing beforehand. And you can sort of, one of the cool things about games today is that you can kind of trace everything back if you keep going. You can see the steps the whole way,
oh
which
yeah.
you can't with so much history, which I like about the history of our little world here, is you can really enjoy that. And I think as much as I like to do that with I grew up in the 90s and stuff, so I was looking at 80s and 70s games with regard to that, but like now, like kids playing games now have so much of this. Like I feel like their early history is really cool, or their prehistory is really cool, because it's like full of amazing games that then they can go, oh, this person was around since then. And we talked about Pauline and Mario, obviously, but they have that orders of magnitude larger, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, it's our Led Zeppelin, or my parents' generation's Led Zeppelin. It's like, when I was your
Mm,
age, this character was really like this.
exactly.
So I grew up with 70s games. So 1971 was when Oregon Trail was invented. And
Right.
that's what, I think everybody knows that, even as a joke. You always see the memes of dying of dysentery everywhere. But then in 1972, Atari was established in California. It's not Japanese, sorry kids who think that. It's now French, but it was established in California. And my first console was the Atari 2600, and I had everything. I had everything on that console. And 1976, because you'd mentioned adventure games, and so that was the first adventure games. That was when Adventure was made, and
Right.
that's when that little garbage pixel dragon. I swear to God, I hated that thing. Just falling
Isn't
around the
it
screen.
isn't
You
it
go.
aw- isn't it awesome that so much of the Atari stuff, the games, the names of the games, Frog Bog notwithstanding, a lot of them were like they're just like the name of the genre. You know what I mean? Like racing, or you know what I
Racing,
mean?
yeah.
Like, yeah, this is
Well, pole position. I
it was so
remember pole position I
right.
played
Yeah.
on the Atari. But yeah, adventure, absolutely. I had Winter Olympics. I had that. I loved that game. It was so impossible to play. But really, like the beginning of the games probably that you played were 1980. Iwatani-san invented Pac-Man, and that started the the era of arcades. And a lot of the companies
Right.
that we grew up with then were invented, things like Namco, Taito, etc. Um, and on Nintendo, it was probably the oldest established company. Do you remember when Nintendo was established?
Well, they used to make cards, I
That's right.
remember, like so long before any of this. So, I mean, was it late 19th century?
Yeah, so 1889 in Kyoto
Right.
was when Nintendo was established, and they made Hanafuda cards. But they made before they made obviously the Famicom, they made really early game cabinets that had electronic components to it, and you can still play them. Their earliest one was in 1973. They're still around in Japanese arcades. There was one in Osaka I went to. And
Amazing.
they have an electronic display, but then they have, let's say, like a metal piece where you could, you have to get it around something that's very, or you have to guide it yourself and like click a button to stop something from moving. Is very, very interesting. But those early Nintendo cabinets are still around, long, long before
That's
the Famicom.
wild.
Yeah. They also Donkey Kong, as we talked about in the beginning, was really one of their first, like what we would consider to be a modern video game in 1981. Again, Happy Bonanza Day for the five people who are celebrating, but who can afford a console. But the Commodore 64 was 1982.
Yes, and this is definitely my era at this stage. My first ever one was, like I said, a Commodore Amiga, an Amiga 600. And the Commodore stuff, I think it's interesting because like so much of video game history is about the machines and when they sort of appeared and the games and when they were invented. But there's this other sort of uh, I guess localized history of each country and how they
Hmm.
sort of managed to engage with it. Like if you talk to folks in Eastern Europe, they don't talk about Nintendo. They talk about like the Dendy or any, behind the Soviet wall. They had to have these like fake versions of the consoles that would run these games. And certainly for Ireland, I feel like because the 80s were economically so difficult and then going into the 90s that the big explosion for us happened in the late 80s with stuff like there were people who would like Commodore 64s and stuff like that. Even things like the BBC Micro weren't big in Ireland because we weren't quite there yet, but then the Amiga was a big one. Excuse me. And then the consoles were when the 90s and the Celtic Tiger happened. That
Hmm.
all that stuff is where games really exploded. Because suddenly there was, and people were had access to that world, and it felt even more exciting probably because nobody's parents had played any of this stuff.
Did you get to play the original, not Super Mario, but did you get to play the original Mario in 1983?
No, I didn't play any Nintendo stuff until a friend of mine got a Super Nintendo down the road, and I remember playing Mario Kart at his house for the first
Yeah,
time.
it was the
And
same
that
with me.
was
We were poor, so we didn't. I
right,
had a Game Boy, but we could never afford an S or a SNES. And
right.
I just want to show you this. I've had this since I was 4 years old.
Oh my God.
Danny, I want you to tell everybody what color Mario is.
It's like, is he Irish? Is it green and blue?
Yeah, he's green and blue. And what
Wait, what
color is
color is Bowser?
this? A Bowser is right
Oh
here.
my God.
That's
He
it.
is he's brown,
Yeah.
wearing blue, and like he looks like a superhero because of it. Peach, thankfully, is in her perfect pink.
Yeah, we've got another Mario there. So I think this is supposed to be
Luigi.
no, it can't, well, it can't be. He's a little tubby, and it does say M on his hat. But this is so if you see these are the original bricks
Oh my
from
gosh.
the original Mario. And
That bullet bill's too small as well. That doesn't make any sense.
don't shame him. But Mario was big for me, and I played the original to death, where it was just you and possibly another Mario. It was just a different color, and you would run out of the screen and come back, and run out of the screen, come back, and
Oh, funny.
it was just the layers of bricks, and then of course you had the Koopa Troopas, and you had the crabs, the old school Mario crabs that would go across the screen, and all you could jump on them, but you could also hit them from underneath, and everything would just get harder and harder as the levels went. That was the original Mario Brothers. 1984, though, was a big one, and that's Tetris. And that's when I got my Game Boy because Game Boy was bundled together with Tetris.
Oh man.
And
That's the good stuff. Back when they used to do that. I mean,
well,
we still
they
got
did it
Wii
again.
Sports
Yes, but
with
they did
yeah.
it again with the DS and the Wii, but that was because of Reggie Fils-Aimé, who convinced them to do it. He said, do you want to sell? Put this together, and he did it twice, and obviously it succeeded. But Tetris, it sneaked out of the Iron Curtain, and
Yes.
it was something that we all got to play on the Game Boy. And so the Game Boy I got it for my eighth birthday, together with that and Kirby's Dream Land, the very first one. And I never let go of those games. Those were really big for me. But one person I do want to mention is the legendary Mr. Jerry Lawson. Do you know who Jerry Lawson
Yes.
is?
Yes. The inventor of the cartridge.
Yes, without him, we wouldn't have ROMs, we wouldn't have cartridges, and he developed them for the Fairchild Channel F, which unfortunately I never had one. Uh,
No, never
but
played one either.
but it was a failed system, and if not for Mr. Jerry, we would not have cartridges today. And it really is due to his technology that he developed that we're able to lend games, blow in games, do all those enjoy those things that we probably shouldn't be doing with cartridges, but
Exactly.
complaining that we don't get physicals anymore,
no load times,
Yep.
all the good stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I feel like there was a, perhaps because he was, sorry, of course he's passed away at this stage.
Yeah.
California native, I believe. I think he
Yes.
was somewhere up here. And of course, sort of as I feel like in more recent years we've gotten better at perhaps celebrating women and non-white people within the industry and their additions to it because I think yeah his particular influence on the industry felt like it was sort of swept under the rug for a little while there, and in more recent years, he's been celebrated a lot more. I
He had a
know.
Google
So
Doodle. It was amazing. There's that very famous picture of him sitting at his computer. He is a very big man with a very tiny computer, and he has a very big smile, and he's so happy to be working on games.
there you go.
So we talked a little bit about your beginning in games, but the 90s era, which was Sega, Sony, and then at the very, very end, Xbox.
Mm.
But where did you start in playing games? What were the first games that you remember playing?
Oh, first games were on the Amiga for sure. And you mentioned Mario Brothers. Well, we had the Great Gianna Sisters. Have you ever played that?
This one, no.
Have you ever heard of it? So the Amiga, we did not get all the fancy Nintendo games. Some of the Amiga games ended up going over to Nintendo and doing better sometimes, but we didn't have Mario. So this guy in Poland, I believe, invented just the most shameless knockoff of Mario ever, called the Great Gianna Sisters,
Amazing.
which was two girls that you got to play as who ran around a 2D, much like you said, things that are legally distinct from Goombas, but just barely. Lots of brick that you were jumping on. The first boss though, and after the first level was a Kid Koopa was a I forget who was the first boss in the first Mario. Where you have to jump over his head, where he's got the hammers. Who is that? Whoever that
That's
is.
Bowser.
That is Bowser. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
right at the
Uh,
end of
uh,
the thing where he's throwing the hammers and you have to go along the little
Yes, you
trail.
have to like
Yeah.
time it. Yeah.
Hmm.
In the Great Gianna Sisters, it was a large ant, and it looked like a real ant. It didn't
It's
look like a
amazing.
cartoon ant. It was just an ant. I don't know why it was an ant. So the Great Gianna Sisters was definitely an early influence on me. I
Poland
think
was an
I'm.
amazing place for video games because it was
Oh
stuck
yeah.
in the middle of many political things. And my friend who's from Poland, but she lives in England now, she grew up on the Commodore. It was a thing that actually slipped through the Iron Curtain, and
Right.
they had all kinds of games exactly like you said. They so many knockoffs that you programmed yourself you
Yeah.
got the
Yeah.
book and you program yourself,
Yes.
and so that was huge in Poland.
And
And they,
piracy was massive there. It's
yeah.
why CD Projekt, the or CD Projekt, CD Projekt, the company behind The Witcher and all that, they were called that because they were originally trying to get people to buy physical versions of games. So they were converting English games into Polish. They were translating them. They were putting them in these special edition boxes, and it was because everyone there bought games at flea markets that were copies of games. In fact, the craziest story I ever heard about piracy comes from Poland. I was talking to Marcin Nowinski, who was the then head of CD Projekt and one of the original founders, and he was saying that during that era when they had the Commodore 64, because those were based on tapes, right? A lot of games you
Hmm.
could run off of tapes. He said there was a time at nighttime on the local radio in Warsaw where they would basically do a countdown and you had to hit record while you were on your tape deck connected to the radio, and they would play the data of the tape over the air. And
That's
you,
amazing.
isn't that insane? That
That's
is like
amazing.
some World War II,
That's
you know,
fantastic. That's amazing.
tech bridging. So then he said you do that, and like half the time, the signal wasn't good enough, and it messed. The game couldn't load properly because of, because that's a really terrible way to copy audio. But he was like, a lot of the time it did work, and that's how people used to copy games sometimes.
That's fantastic.
It's
Amazing.
bizarre.
Did you ever play? I mean, I had some of I had some contraband, but I had some LCD stuff that was not knockoffs, but it was sort of like Game and Watch adjacent. So I had a DuckTales one that was not it kind of knocked off that technology, and you only had
Right.
like three levels on it. It was very interesting. Um,
I remember
speak.
the first time I saw Game and Watch, I didn't realize what it was, but it was we used to have students stay with us. Like foreign students would come
Mhm.
and stay with us. A bit of extra cash for the family, in especially in the 80s, and so I had to stay with my brother for 4 months while we had a student stay in my bedroom or whatever. But a lot of them were from Spain, all over the place. There was a guy from Russia, I remember one time, but we also got Japanese students. So there was these amazing Japanese girls, which to me, when I was like 5 or 6, were just like, I was enraptured by them. I was just like, where are you from? And like all of the like clothes they had and all the things they had were crazy. And one of the girls had a Game and Watch of, I think it was Donkey Kong. I know it if I see it. And she used to show me how to play it, and I remember thinking like, wow, Japan's amazing. Like they have all this cool stuff that we don't have. And
Have you ever
yeah,
been
yeah.
there?
Just once we did a documentary on Final Fantasy
Oh,
14,
oh
and
yes, that's right.
I was in Tokyo for it was a pretty quick trip. I think we were there 6 days in total, including the flights, and it was just magical. Yeah, I can't wait to go back. I spent some time in Korea last year and really enjoyed that as well.
Did you go to the arcades?
Yeah, went to a lot of arcades, and what else do we do? There was this other. They just have like the way they do malls as well is insane over there. I remember we turned up at one mall in Seoul, and they were like, "Oh, we don't have a parking lot. You just bring it in here, and then the valet brings it into an elevator, and
Hmm.
it goes into." And I was like, "What is that? It's like the future here. What happened to us? We got off the train."
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, we lost our arcade culture
Yeah,
because when consoles came in, really when everybody had a console in the early 90s, and like I said, people started having different things like Sega, and then they had PlayStation. Our arcades started falling away, but Japan and Korea in the East in general, they really started upping their arcades, and that's where we started getting more of like the rhythm games and things like that because they innovated. They went, here are games that you can't play at home.
right.
And so they've got dancing games, rhythm games. They have those card games that you tap on the display.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Very cool, amazingly cool. I went to so many arcades when I was in Japan. I went to every single one of the Gigos. Unfortunately, the big one in Akihabara shut down yesterday,
Yeah.
which made me very sad. I was there. I was there. I kissed the ground and hugged the machines. But I was just enjoying the variety of games that they have that are so different from here. They had a JoJo's game that was it's not because they had a fighting game that was made in I think the early I can't say if it's 1988 or 1989, but there was a very early JoJo's game that you can play online but is not available here. And they had it in the arcade, but then they had the sequel to that, which was like some weird blend of perspective 3D where your character's in a wedge corner and you have
Okay.
one joystick and you have to essentially control both the camera and the character at the same time. And I was just enjoying watching all these absolutely mental games that we have no concept of here. And I, not even necessarily watching other people play them and how, it's the most natural thing in the world. Like, yeah, of course, we've had this game for 10 years and it's so popular and nobody here has heard of it. It's very interesting to see the difference in Eastern and Western perspectives on games. When I was in Japan, no word of a lie, the most popular thing at the time was Forspoken. And
Oh,
because
really?
it's published by Square Enix and the Japanese translation was excellent.
Okay.
And they treated it as an isekai sort of game, and it actually didn't do too badly in Japan. And whereas here, not so great. But
Yeah.
it was the thing. And yet in the West, all I heard was people talking about Assassin's Creed, which nobody plays there. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Or Xboxes, which I mean, nobody plays anywhere
I
now, but
could I could oh God. Well, we'll get into that. But I was walking, I went to every single game store. Super Potato, Joshin.
very,
I went Yodobashi Camera everywhere. Not an Xbox on sale.
it's
Nowhere.
wild, isn't it? Yeah.
Not
They just
another
don't.
Xbox game. I
Yeah.
even asked people and they're like, "Oh yeah, like if you go to like the resale, there's some people who have the grand era of the 360s. They have a lot of the RPGs on the wall, but that's it. That's all they've got."
Yeah, yeah. I the only place I would spot them is like old 360 stuff. Yeah, in like the secondhand markets. Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? Just doesn't exist.
What would you say is your favorite console?
Oh man, I mean, so the Amiga obviously that's where I played all my first games like Monkey Island and Sensible Soccer and Azul and all these
Sensible
games I
soccer.
loved. Oh
Oh my
my God,
gosh.
yeah. I did I have every version. It's on this room. It's in a different room. Me and my brother have basically every copy, I think, and then I stole them all. Sorry, Alan. Um, uh,
We'll have him on next time and hear his
Exactly.
perspective.
Yeah, he can give me. Yeah, exactly. He can unload on me. So my favorite console. I mean, the first one I ever got was the Mega Drive, and that was sort of the
Wow.
Genesis, as was known, in North America. But that it was years after it came out. Like I think my friends were already buying PlayStations, and I was getting a Mega Drive. But it was great because like all these cheap games on it. Maybe the console that like had the most impact on me. I think eventually. I think the first one I bought myself, we got a PlayStation from somewhere eventually, but again, it was like 5 years after the PlayStation had come out. I think the summer I bought a friend of mine loaned me his PlayStation 2 when he went on holidays. And that was like a revolution to me. He lent me that and Grand Theft Auto 3, and I was just like set. Like I can just play this for the entire summer.
Arguably the best one. Yeah.
I mean, it was so revolutionary because I remember playing GTA 1 and 2 on the family PC. We had a PC because my brother went to Trinity to do computer science, so we needed a computer at home
Nice.
was the logic, right? Exactly, yeah. So we could play Half-Life. Um, so uh,
Part of
so
an academic study, yes.
right. So when I think of my favorite consoles, I've owned a lot over the years, but like I think probably the PC that we had at home was actually the machine that I connected with the most and where I found all of my favorite games to this day. But yeah, I think my 360, the 360 era is definitely undervalued. I think that era, I was working at a GameStop when it came out. I couldn't afford it immediately, but I think maybe 9, 12 months later, I managed to get one. And then I'd played so many games in the little. We didn't even have a break room. We just had like this crawl space behind one of the displays. It was like
Mhm.
maybe 4 foot wide and like the height of the room or whatever. But we stuck a little 360 back there on a terrible 720p monitor, and I remember playing all the games because you could just go out and grab one. So during lunch break, I'd play Project Gotham Racing or whatever. What was that weird 3D platformer where you were the girl? It was, I forget what it was called.
Cameo?
Cameo. Good
Yeah.
job. I knew there was a K in there. Yeah, Cameo.
I know
Yeah,
what I'm doing.
yeah. You should be doing video game documentaries.
Oh no, I
Um,
leave that to you. We don't have the budget or time or production value for that. You are the best person for that for sure. I played a lot on my Atari 2600 and I even had that terrible ET game.
oh yeah.
I played it to death. There was no way to win it, but I still played it because I was four and I needed something to play.
Oh,
I even had like the cool Sesame Street games where you had the cool controller. It was a pad and it had buttons on it and
okay.
you could slip in they all had slip in faces, So each button scheme was different. And so if you had like Sesame Street or kids games, you would slip in the front face and then you could push different games to make Big Bird or Cookie Monster do different things. And I remember we had a video game expo here in Montreal, and I saw that for the first time in
Oh
30 years, and I just
wow.
broke down. I couldn't believe
Oh,
it. It was, it's one of those core memories that you think, you're never, well, why is this important? I'm never going to see this again. And then I saw it, and everybody's like, what are the buttons for? And I went, let me tell you what the buttons are for. But the PS1 was a big one because we, like I said, just like you, we couldn't afford an S or a SNES.
Yep.
And I only ever played N64 again, at friends where I babysat for kids in friends' houses. But the PS1 was like the next console that we actually got. Came out in 1995, and I think we only got it a year later.
Cool.
But that was when we stopped going to arcades. I went to arcades all the time and played
Right.
everything from Moonwalker to
Oh,
Teenage Mutant
Moonwalker
Ninja.
was great.
Oh,
Yeah.
such a good game. To Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Simpsons game. I played all the original Virtua Fighter. I played all of them. And we used to have little tournaments. You know how it is, you put the quarter on the machine and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
But that was when we got the PS1, that was really when I stopped going to arcades. I never had a Commodore, but like just like you, we finally got a family computer when I was in grade 11, I would say, grade 10, grade
Right.
11. But you know what I did play? All the edutainment games. And I played, I don't know if you had it in Ireland, but the Encarta Encyclopedia.
Oh yeah, Encarta was like that was the one we had the one computer in my school that got wheeled around, everyone had back then, and I remember Encarta on that. And
Do you
then when
remember the
we got
Mind
our
Maze? Do you remember the game that
I
came with it?
do. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I do, yeah. Was there
I
two
played
games
that.
in it?
Well,
Was
there
there
was a music game, but the Mind Maze you could put to any category.
Yeah.
And that game, it was a dungeon crawler, but with
Yes.
knowledge, and you had to figure out puzzles and things. And that game, I played hundreds and hundreds of hours.
Oh
Oh
my
my
God.
gosh, yeah. But just
I
like
miss that era, just the visual and the sound, like that
the
8-bit
the
audio and
MIDI
the
sound, yeah.
yeah, and the way that graphics would load in was like this weird, like I don't know, like
Hmm.
horizontal scanning, and oh my God, yeah. And Cardiff was like because like it was basically the whole thing was like because before we this is like anyone who's under the age of like 30 is like you Luddites, but like do you like the idea of the traveling encyclopedia salesman was not that far removed. But now we have Wikipedia, so all of this is completely redundant. But
But
Encarta was
Wikipedia
like,
doesn't have Mind Maze.
That's true. Hey, they should add it. They got games on there. But like the idea that like, oh yeah, you don't worry about we had the encyclopedia shelf, right? With
We
with
did.
all of the letters, yeah. But imagine all of that knowledge and more on one CD. Like that's how they were selling it.
Please do a no clip on this. I would love to have, or
Oh,
just early edutainment. I would love you for you to do Mech, the guy and the Learning Company, right? The guys who did like Treasure Cove and all that. But Mech, they were all these two companies were responsible for like Super Munchers, Math Blaster. Of course, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, which was such a
yes.
phenomenon. But we had so much edutainment when I was a kid.
My
That's
my
what
first
really.
game that my parents ever bought me was the Amiga game Fun School 2.
Oh my
And it
gosh, that
had
one I never
it,
played.
I don't think it made it out of Europe. It was I have it here. I found it. I bought a copy of it. I went on a tear about 6 years ago, and I got the original box of my console and everything. The one that like was underneath the Christmas tree, which
Hmm.
was for me, my brother, and my sister. It was so expensive. It was for all of us for
Hmm.
Christmas. Um, but
This
yeah,
is
Fun
you
School
always,
too.
I'm sure, I don't know if you ever had the your parents say to you, now this is for the holidays and your birthday.
Oh yeah, my birthday's January 5th. I got that every year.
My
My
birthday
brother's
is
birthday
this
is,
December, yeah. Yeah.
is when's yours in December?
Yeah, it's in the beginning of December, so
The
forget it.
beginning.
There's no
Yeah,
point.
my brother was December 19th and I was January 5th. So like
Oh
no, so yeah, we're
no.
we're very used to that in our house. He used to the Christmas tree would go up on his birthday and they'd take it down on mine.
Wait, in Ireland it's bad luck to take it down before Bridget's Day.
I don't know if my parents were tuned into that, but yeah, no. They were like January 5th was often the first day back at school. So,
Ah.
I had a great birthday.
Well, I guess if you got your presents early, if you could see it that way. But for me, it was always, if I when I got the Game Boy, and then I got Kirby's Dream Land, and my parents were like, "This is for the holidays and your birthday, and that's it." So, which I think is interesting because my parents, even though they were very strict, video games were fine. because I was safe
Oh,
in the
cool.
I was safe in the house. I was able when I was older, I worked at a place called Sam Goody, which was kind of like the pre-EB games or like the pre. So Sam Goody did music, but we also had games, and we had just like you, we had in the back we had a GoldenEye display.
Oh,
And so
cool.
we were never allowed to play it until we made the day. So we had to make like 1,500 sales. And then my boss would shut the front door, and then we could turn off the lights and go play GoldenEye in the
Oh,
back.
that's amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. I have so many stories about working there, but I'll bore you with that another time. But
We can trade them. I was at HMV for a year. I was at
oh my God.
GameStop for a year, for maybe 3 years, and I worked at it. My first ever job was at an independent game store in my hometown called Games Dimension. When I was like 14, I think I got a winter job there. It was good times.
I worked at Sam Goody, and then I worked at Future Shop, and then I worked at EB Games, which became GameStop. And then I went into games and started making games. And and then of course GameStop became awful. So I never even went back there, not even to buy games.
Really?
No.
We did have an electronics boutique in Dublin, I remember. There
Oh,
was
I
one of
remember
them.
that.
Yeah.
We had a comp for our PC games. We had a Comp USA, and this was a computer. I don't think they're still around. This was sort of like a mega computer superstore, but they had a wall of PC games and
Oh,
all these diff
cool.
it was amazing. And that was when though my parents, I don't know what happened, but there was a transition when I got older, when I was maybe 14 to 16, and we got a computer. Games were always fine until PC games. And I remember going to, this comes into the next question I wanted to ask you is why do you think that games in the West still get a bad rap? Because when I'll never forget when we went to CompUSA and my mom said, oh, you can pick a game. And so computer games were cheap then. They were like $20. And that was 1980s money. So maybe they're not that
Yeah.
cheap now. But she's like, okay, you can pick a game because we need something for the computer. And so I would actually go for the entertainment stuff, but my mom saw Hexen on the wall.
Wow.
And I'll never forget this, but she saw Hexen and she went,
I'll
"What
be
is
there.
Oh, probably, yeah, probably." And so she looked at it and she was disgusted. And she's, "What is?" And you know what's interesting? I was already playing Chex Quest, which is sort of
Right.
like a soft version of Doom, and that was
Yes.
fine because there was no blood in it. My mom, but I don't know what it is. I think maybe the satanic images and like the blood on the cover. But my mother looked at the box and she was horrified. And I've never seen anybody do that turn from
That's
computer games
amazing.
are fine to. So why do you think it is in the West that video games still get a bad rep?
It's funny. Yeah, I wonder if it was like the witchcraft name that it sort of had or
My
something like
mother
that.
doesn't know
That
German. It's
caught
fine.
Yeah, I was similar to I wasn't allowed to play games during the week, so we were only allowed to do it on the weekends.
Um,
For most of my young life, definitely. And then it wasn't until I saved up all summer and bought my own computer that my mom was like, then I was like, I remember when my mom came home and I was like, look, I bought my own computer. It's in my room. You can't do anything now. And I was expecting her to be mad. And she was like, good job. And I was like, oh, you like 4D chest parented me into being responsible with money. How dare you? I think a large part of this is how they were marketed in the early 90s. I think like there was this when video games were sort of like a culturally sort of under the radar for a while there. And then when they started to make a bit more money with the home console market, you had this super aggressive, super male focused, child focused way of marketing games. It was really like the sort of Bart Simpson generation. It was seemed to be aimed at, and it changed the conversation around games. I think in the broader mainstream culture in like loads of different ways. I think it definitely pushed women out in lots of ways, in ways that more aggressively than perhaps that was the case beforehand. I think it definitely sort of made it sound like games were for kids more, which I
mm,
don't necessarily think was the vibe prior to that. Or at least it pushed it more in that direction. And I think it also reduced it to like the type of media that we associate with like popcorn cinema or action movies or I don't think games were highbrow in the broader culture before that, but I think that had a retarding effect on their acceptance because I think it made games feel like they were these you know that they were for silly kids and just a way of distracting hyperactive boys or something like that.
Yeah, it's
And
very
I think,
interesting when you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, and I think so. I think in many ways, games have had to like there are lots of games that are aimed at a mostly male focused. I mean, I think that's a sort of a problem throughout game design and the market as it exists today. But I definitely feel like games had to crawl out of that particular mainstream, you know, vision or whatever. Like I remember all my early stuff. I worked in radio as a teenager, and then I started to get asked to go because I knew about games and stuff. I started to work on national radio. They called me up to be like a guest to talk about specific issues, and it was almost always somebody who was an adult talking about something controversial within games, and I would have to come on as the voice of reason, I would have said, but the voice of game players and what this actually was. So I remember being on with like Mothers Against Drink Driving for Grand Theft Auto 4 and like all of these conversations
Oh
about
my
games. It
God.
was always framed that way. And I definitely remember that those calls slowed down over the years. That as the years ticked by, that those types of conversations weren't happening anymore. That people had accepted games, at least there was an incremental shift in the way people were accepting them. But I definitely think the early 90s and a lot of that marketing and who we were aiming games at has a lot to answer for with regard to that.
There's well, when I was working in EB, we were it was back when San Andreas came out. And of
Right.
course, in the West there was a big kerfuffle over it. And I can tell you that everybody who came in, there was one lady who came in, her son was 5 years old, and she picked San Andreas off the wall and she goes, "I want this, please." And I said, "Okay, that's fine. You are an adult and he is a child and you are buying it for him. But I have to let you know that there is sex in this game." And her answer was, "So, it's just a game."
Hmm.
And she bought it, and that was that. And I think that I think, as always, I think in the West, it's a lot of media that's just making up stuff. You just go, "You have not played this game."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I find immediately, even on YouTube nowadays, I can tell immediately who's played a game and who hasn't because I've played them. And the second that I know somebody hasn't played them, I go, you haven't touched this." And so I think again, it's like my mother and Hexen, where you just go ahead, "Have you even played this?"
Right.
And I think I don't know what it is. You're right that I think that when computer games started to come in, there was again like the shift in the marketing where it was from it, but it wasn't like that in Asia. And if you look at a lot of even the early Japanese ads for they always show, yes, they might not always show children, but they always showed men and women enjoying games. And
Right.
whereas in the West, for some reason, like you said, it became more of a boy's toy. And but yet I find so we started talking because we were talking about the ads for PlayStation and how
Hmm.
ads for PlayStation started to be they were more adult and they were aimed at adults.
Yeah.
And so Sony was always, or the PS1 was always seen as the adult apparatus, whereas Nintendo was for kids so
Yes.
a lot of the Western marketing then got split between Sony and Xbox over here, and you had Nintendo over here in the kids space because it was cartoony and fun. But then you had games like Conker's Bad Fur Day. I remember people complaining about that one, where people were like, "Oh, well, why does the squirrel have such a filthy mouth? That doesn't make any sense."
Yeah,
It's
I the PlayStation stuff is funny because unfortunately, like it is a reaction to the early 90s stuff. It is Sony coming into the market and going, we're not going to beat these. We're more sophisticated in lots of ways because we're doing 3D rendering and it's on a CD and like we're pushing everything forward, but also like to a large extent, Sonic and Mario were taking up a lot of space and we need to aim this thing at a different market and the market that they sort of looked at was the late teenager to like early 20s person, like club culture, countercultural in some ways, people that were more sort of tech and fashion savvy. So you had all these crazy ads like the alien girl with the Irish accent sitting on the
Scottish.
table. Scottish, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, sorry. The
The double life one is the one that always got me every
Which
time.
one was that?
It's the clips of people saying, "I
Oh
live a double
yes.
life." Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, and it's very evocative of like that type of. like we did a documentary on Wipeout on 2097 that came out, and like they the studio Psygnosis that were working on that, like they were, a lot of them were young people in their 20s who were going out and partying and having disco biscuits after work, so like that's the game they were making, you know what I mean? They were making this game that I like had like Prodigy and Future Sounds of London and Orbital playing over the top of the tracks, and it was aggressive, and yeah, it wasn't Mario Kart. Like look at Wipeout and look at Mario Kart, and you've basically got Sony and Nintendo summed up right there.
Hmm.
In what those two consoles were. But I do think that was a reaction. And I think it helped. And I think you were basically it's similar to like how a lot of the Minecraft kids ended up being the Fortnite, young adults, where I think a lot of kids were aging out of Nintendo. And I think that's the sort of this is a very selfish expression of the history, because I feel like I'm sort of the main character in this history. But when I look at the 90s to the sort of the where we are now, it seemed like a lot of the sophistication was coming up with an era that was maybe a couple of years older than me, but was like we're getting more mature at that pace. You know what I mean? Like we are late teens and early adults at the PlayStation era, and then it just keeps going up from there. In terms of the games that were coming out, that might be just my perspective, and so it's not exactly watertight, but it definitely felt like we were crawling out of the kiddie stuff from the early 90s for sure for a long time. And not that we've completely done that. Now games are they're so bifurcated, they're so split up all over the place that it's hard to tell. The monoculture is gone everywhere, and the monoculture in games is also gone. Like we're
And now
not
you
in
have
that world
40-year-olds
anymore.
screaming about Mario Kart. And you
Right.
and you have kids are calling your mama a whore on Call of Duty. So,
Everything changes and everything stays the same.
Yep, exactly. Well, in general, what are your thoughts on games media? How it's changed and where do you think it's going?
You mean games like games journalism,
Yeah.
games how we so yeah, I think this is the only epoch I have ever really worried about it at all. Obviously it is a byproduct of all media. Like there are some specific things that changed within games, but especially with streaming and YouTube. But like largely the death of magazines in games. If anything, games hung on a lot longer than most magazines did, but that was a long time coming.
Edge is still around. Same thing
Yeah,
with
I think so.
now Debug magazine is there. I mean, obviously PlayStation magazine is still around, but it doesn't come with demo discs anymore, which is very
Oh my
sad.
God. See, that's the thing. That's like there's the golden era of that stuff was I remember getting that Metal Gear Solid demo on the official PlayStation magazine. Yeah, I must have had a PlayStation 1 at that stage. Yeah, when MGS came out, I did have one. So must have maybe I think me and my brother chipped in and got a second hand one. Yeah, that's what it was. Um but yeah, I mean, if we're talking about sort of where we are now in the online media, like for a long time when I worked at GameSpot, like there was a while where a lot of those websites were not making much money. Like they had very large teams of people. Um, Video was really important for a while there, and we were sort of on the tip of that spear, us and IGN, for a long time. And I think ultimately what happened is that as everything transitioned online, and then YouTube was the big one because it democratized so much about especially video coverage, which
Mm.
was the biggest problem was bandwidth costs. And then suddenly when YouTube was willing to take the hit on that, um it opened the floodgates. And over the next 10 years, you saw something really interesting happen, which I think for sure was better for games coverage. Um, and I use that term because I don't when the word games media is relevant and a good term to use, but it sort of takes citizen journalism out of the question a little bit. And I
Yeah.
think like a lot of what's interesting and what's happened over the past 15 years is because of that. And so I think YouTube, what you had was you had fandoms that were able to like talk to themselves, and games that were really complicated. So you had people who would like cover World of Warcraft. If you're a beat writer at GameSpot and you're reviewing lots of games, you don't get to be a specialized gamer in any one thing. And I think that was really cool. I think that's the strongest thing that's coming out of YouTube for sure. And then Twitch, to a certain extent, has also kind of done that. And I think it was hard for most games coverage websites to catch up with that. What was sort of left after all that was reporting. And so games writing and reporting has obviously been massively devalued in the past 15 years. It's the one area that I think YouTube and Twitch people struggle at. I think it requires so much offline time to research and do good work. I mean, there are exceptions like Jake Geller and H Bomber Guy and stuff like that, but like, I'm saying just like your general YouTuber who's playing games and stuff, they can't get into that nitty gritty. And yeah, just unfortunately, like all media and all journalism, it's become less and less valued, even though those stories seem to get shared even more than they ever did on social media and other platforms. So I do worry about games coverage. I think we're in a, with no clip, we tried to pick a very particular lane, like an area that, um, you know, it was something that I wanted to do because nobody else was doing it, and also you couldn't do it really under the the auspices of a large media organization
Yeah.
because this stuff is not like made to make money. You can't like it's we're able to do it because we have an amazing community of patrons who believe in the mission. But like you're not spending 3 years making a Dwarf Fortress documentary and then getting ad rev that pays for that. You know what I mean? Like it's just so in any type of media organization, it just would make no sense. Like we've had people come and like, do you want to who want to like acquire no clip? And I'm like, you don't want to acquire like this stuff does not.
Honestly, cross your, if they offered you $10 million, I'd be like, okay, sure.
I
I'll
don't know
go
what the number would be. It would have to
with
be
with that money, go off and make another
another
no
thing.
clip
Yeah,
asterisk, and then you just go, now we can do really crazy movies and you know.
exactly. God mode, you call it, or something.
Oh, that'd be
Some other.
great. Do that,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we're running out of cheat codes.
Well, you call it,
But
well, no clip. Where does no clip come from?
yeah, it's a cheat code. It's an old, yeah, first person
ID
shooter. I
software,
mean,
Commander
yeah.
Keen. Yeah.
The second doc we ever did was at id, and I was like, you guys are going to sue us for using no clip, right? And there.
Nah.
So yeah, it was an old cheat code in a bunch of games. And the way I sort of interpreted it was in the 3D games. So when they made Doom and stuff like that, you could no clip through the walls, and because those games were first person, no clip means just basically it turns off clipping. So your character does not stop when they hit a wall or a floor or a ceiling. They can walk through the wall, and we call that clipping because it's like two pieces of geometry that probably shouldn't be intersecting are or whatever. And so the idea was like, oh, we're going to get inside game studios. We're going to like no clip into game studios. We're going to be able to get through the walls and talk about them. Yeah, and so that's why I called it no clip. Although a lot of like Gen wires, or I don't know, the ones that came after us, they all think it's because they're not clips, they're long videos. So I'm like, oh, whatever.
Oh,
I
is
don't
that what
think
they think? Okay.
it's not a lot of
That's
them do.
fine.
Yeah, they don't know about that reference. No,
That's fine. They
that's all
don't
right.
have to worry. The it's okay. That you know what? That's better than anything else they could probably come up with.
Do you know the back rooms? You know all that stuff, like the those liminal spaces
Liminal
that like
spaces, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So like the back rooms are like supposed to be like, these strange liminal spaces that are like behind our reality that you can, and they say, and kids talk about this and all this, it's all like YouTube shorts and Instagram horror videos of all the back rooms, but people say that no clip into it. So we always get emails from random kids that are like think that we're something to do with the back rooms, and they're like, oh yeah. Or there's actually a game called No Clip as well that is like basically a liminal space game, a horror game.
Hmm.
Um and you're yeah, so we're always getting like weird emails from people who think that this is like some ARG or something when they
You know,
find our website.
I thought it was going to be weird. I thought they were like emailing you for game advice because people have sent me videos on
Right.
that too. Remember back in the day when you didn't know how to continue in a game and there was a hotline you would call and there were
Oh
people
my
who,
God.
yeah, I remember those. I remember
Like
those days.
Nintendo Hotline or
Yes. Yep.
yeah.
I remember
Remember,
those.
I remember like in the magazines having like, games were for sale and you had to mail a check and then they'd send you the game. It's like, wow, that would never work now.
Oh
You
no.
know,
No. The catalogs were great. Go in the Sears catalog and you'd circle all the things that you wanted for the holidays. And you'd get maybe one.
you're right. Exactly. Yeah,
Whichever
yeah.
one was on sale. What do you think for your money? What do you think are some of the most culturally important games?
Oh, it's hard because like you immediately go to the ones that have had the most reach, right? So, I don't think too highly of the artistic worth of Call of Duty, but it has affected the most people. It's probably kept friends who were in college connected, in their 30s and beyond.
For me, that was
And
World of
so,
Warcraft. That came out when I
right.
was in university. Yeah.
And WoW to me, I think, is a much more palatable answer to that question.
Yeah.
And also I think that like has stronger um social ties. Like I never met, there are games like COD or stuff that you played with your friends, but I met friends in WoW. Like that's the difference. I definitely, yeah, World of Warcraft is definitely has to be up there just in terms of reach and impact and just how wonderful and persistent that world feels. Like that feels like a place that I spent a lot of time in. It doesn't feel like a video game that I sat down in front of. That was a place. Like I remember what Gulsher looks like. I remember the dead mines as well as I do some of my old apartments. You know what I mean? Like the
You remember
layout of
everybody
it.
spamming, "Where's Bingles?" 60 times in the chat.
Hogger. When is Hogger spawning? You know what I
Yep.
mean? All
He's
that
still
stuff.
there. He's still
All
hanging
right,
out.
exactly still spawning, especially when WoW Classic came out. That was what brought me back in there for sure. Um, and then there are like games that like there's the Mario and Sonic, and you can go down that route and talk about it. But like the games that I find the most interesting are the ones that have created like really strong subcultures that you sort of never know about. Like the flight sim community is very interesting because there's lots of people who are pilots now, whether commercial pilots or in general aviation, who started off doing it because of the flight sim games.
Mm,
And we did a small doc on the flight sims, which was wild. The flight simulator, the one that came out, it came out in 2020. It came out during the height of the pandemic, and it
mhm.
was this weird moment where people were able to travel around the world in the one time in history, in modern history, post where they weren't able to do so. But then there's games like
Animal Crossing is the same, I would say. Animal Crossing New
yes,
Horizons. Yeah.
that had a massive moment then
There
as
are
well.
actually academic texts about Animal Crossing New Horizons' effect on people during the pandemic and
Right,
how people who played that game with their friends came out much better mentally for it than people who had no way
really.
of connecting with their friends. Yeah.
I definitely think that gamers had a cheat code during the pandemic because we had a way to play with other people. We had
Outside and all sports canceled. My dream! Yay!
the sports was hard for me. That's as much as I love games, I am addicted to too many sports. But yeah, I think that's a big one. And to that point as well, I think games like Minecraft and Fortnite, serve that function. Among Us had a big moment during the
Yeah,
pandemic as well
that's right.
because it
Yeah.
was something that younger kids were able to play with each other. Like it's so sad. And you think about like all those the poor generation of kids. I feel like anyone between the ages of like 7 and 15 was probably like really badly affected by those years. And at least having a place for them to play, and that's what Fortnite is to most kids. It's just group chat. Like it's just the thing they do
Yeah.
during group chat, and Minecraft before that. But then I like to think of like games like Dwarf Fortress that have that appeal to a very particular type of people who are sort of under served within games. And that's a game that's been in development for 20 years and will be for the rest of the Adams brothers' lives. That's their one game they're going to make forever.
It
And
really,
like
it really is their child. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
it's absolutely it's such a weird thing, but it's touched so many people. Even people who haven't played it. I talked for people who don't know, Dwarf Fortress is like this incredibly complex sort of sandbox simulator game where you essentially operate a fort where dwarves go mining, but you don't control any of them. You just sort of ask them to do stuff
It's
and
like a
like
colony simulator a little bit.
yeah, but
Yeah.
like the amount of like specifics, like the how dirty their nails are, and like do there's this old story about all the cats were dying at one stage, and it was because they were walking into the tavern and getting beer on their paws and then licking their paws because they were clean cleaning themselves and getting alcohol poisoning. Like that's the level of simulation that this thing was doing. And Tarn often talks about, he's one of the creators, he talks about the fact that the people who play Dwarf Fortress aren't the actual people who play the game. That's like sort of the like highest level of it. It's the people who read the stories about it.
Yes,
That like
exactly. Yeah.
that makes you a participant in it. Like the generating these weird moments that have emerged from this simulation, and telling those stories and then reading those stories, that's actually the game. And in that way, Dwarf Fortress has touched tens of millions of people. So yeah, it's I feel like I feel a bit worried for the industry at the moment on a purely commercial level, but in
Yeah.
terms of making innovative stuff, we're in such an amazing place when it comes to, indie games and what
Indie
I like.
games.
Yeah.
Get your indie games. There's so many good indie games in the last 10 years, from Dwarf Fortress to Dead Cells to I could just go on.
Yeah, Balatro went crazy
Oh,
last year, of
Balatro is
course,
the
and yeah.
best. It's so good. That's another one of those games where people are like, oh, it's just a poker simulator. I'm like, and you haven't played it.
It's actually based on some, what is it? It's a Big Five. It's called. It's a Chinese version of where they use poker hands, but actual the game itself. And that game was made because the pandemic happened and the developer wanted to play Big Five with his friends. Like
Yeah,
that was it's bizarre. But I've started to use this other term called undiscovered games
yeah,
because indie games has become such a large thing. And like
yeah.
technically games like Hades 2 is an indie game, right? But like Supergiant has a lot of money coming off the back of Hades 1. They're very
Another
experienced.
absolutely phenomenal
Yeah.
culturally
Oh,
shifting game.
you must love that with all of.
Oh,
I'm a
fantastic.
big. I love Greek myth and all that stuff, but you must have been loving that, I'd
Oh, it's
say. Just
amazing. Absolutely. Well, definitely one of my, not only my favorite roguelite, but I mean just one of the greatest games I've ever played is Hades 1 for sure.
it's
And
terrific.
I don't play them in early access because I don't want to be spoiled.
Nice.
So I wait until, I mean, it's, listen, I am a person who will pre-order anything. Just show me that it's being made and I'll pre-order it. I don't pre-order based on no gameplay, but that I'm very excited for Hades too. I know some people are going to be screaming Silk Song in the comments for this for sure, because if we don't mention Hollow Knight, there, Hollow Knight mentioned. Enjoy everybody,
We
but
might get both of them in this year, you know?
well, I say it's
That's
definitely going to be October
yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you then, what do you think are some of the most influential games on the industry? And obviously, I would say Silk Song, but Hollow Knight is
Yes.
definitely one of them.
The rogue-like explosion was we've sort of come through the other side of it now, and I think because we were getting a lot of copycats, I feel like, whereas we're now starting to get like really interesting versions of it. Like Pacific Drive came out recently, which is a first-person driving game, but it's very much cribbing from some of that stuff. Like in if we're talking about contemporary times, I think Dark Souls.
At Demon Souls first.
Sorry, Demon Souls. Yes, of course. Yeah,
If because I
exactly.
know there's going to be somebody sniffing in the comments going, Demon Souls was first.
It's like, what's your favorite Mario Kart? Is the first Mario Kart you played? You know, it's like I only entered the Soulsborne train on Bloodborne, and then had to work backwards from there. But yeah, I think those games allowed developers to slow down and make things more difficult, just across the board. Like I think there was something really and the amazing thing is that it did take like 4 or 5 of those games coming out. Like I remember Kevin Van Ord reviewing Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1, I think he did as well. For GameSpot back in the day, and like trying to figure out what this thing was really. Like it's such a different type of game. You're not just running and gunning, like you can get killed in one interaction, one
I
swing of
would
the sword.
say, for my money, I would say that it's a natural sequel to Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Because if you look, I would say Castlevania Symphony of the Night is definitely one of the most influential games on the industry in general. Because if you look at how that game is structured, and it's not like Metroid, it's very different. It's more of an RPG, but how that game is structured with the map, how you cannot go forward, obviously, without doing other things, and then how there's also a leveling system. There's also all the secret walls, everything. And then you look at how Demon Souls is structured, it's almost identical in
And
how they're structured.
Yeah, and I think arcades have an effect on this too, because obviously arcades were created with the goal of people dropping quarters in them, and so games on arcades were much more challenging. And then when we brought games into the home, a lot of them were arcade games, but you basically had unlimited credits. And then that didn't feel good anymore. Like there was a shift within game design of like we can't really make these hyper difficult um games that people want to play over and over again. The thing that they're actually wanting is these longer experiences that are more diverse than just replaying one level over and over until you get it. And then so what happens then is the games end up getting much longer track, but then you want the player to see all that track that you've built. So then the games get easier. And so you had this like sort of games getting easier for a good while, and then Dark Souls and probably some other stuff that I'm not thinking of. Sorry, Demon Souls. They sort of allowed the industry to get difficult again. Like games had hard modes, but like usually it was just changing some numbers or making the objectives slightly more difficult. But that game at its core was something you did need to slow down and master, and we just lost that mastery for a good reason, probably because
I think it also had to do with the fact that the Wii at the time was the height of the Wii era. And as much as I did love the Wii, the Wii was very casual focused. And so this is a time when phones really didn't have games yet. We had a few games on phones. And so a lot of the casual folks in the last 15 years have moved over to phones and mobile have their own games now, which they often share with PC now, but it wasn't like that back in the
yeah,
day. This is before we had smartphones. This is the flip phone era. So there were some phones that you could play. Gameloft had a few good games you could play, but really the Wii and its explosion of casual games really left players who wanted something more challenging in the dust. And then out of that came obvious in 2009 you had Demon Souls, which was I had the Hong Kong version that came out
ooh,
3 months before the North American version, which had all the terrible localization, and it was so
oh really?
wonderful. But there was no guide. If you didn't know what to do, and nothing was explained to you, you're like, wait a minute, what do you mean I have half health now when I die? What do you
You're
mean
right.
that the more that I die, this interaction changes over here? No, there was no guide. Nobody knew anything about this game, and
And also
it was
a guide can only
fantastic.
get you so far in that
Yeah,
game, right? Because
yeah.
at a certain point you just had to you had to win the fight, you know? You had to slow down and
I
do it the
remember it
hard
took it
way.
took the bridge in this I that was so hard for me until I finally got a long shield and a poker. And I beat the whole game with the wing spear because I went, you know what? No, I'm doing it this way. But then when I got to when you finally made it and you got to the giant tower knight, I went, I hate this. And then but I kept coming back and I kept coming back until I beat it 3 times that game.
It's
And
so
there was
strange.
that sense of accomplishment was so incredible. And I kept trying to tell people, you gotta play this. No, it's
Yeah.
too hard, too hard. Like, no, you don't understand. It will get you. You will feel good. I promise you. But I think one of the games, not only Castlevania Symphony of the Night that contributed to that, I think Shadow of the Colossus is really one of the most influential games of all time because that really, for me, was the first open world exploration only game
Mm.
where you could only see most of the story or most by exploring. You had no choice. And where the obviously the Colossus themselves were the levels. And if you didn't beat that, too bad.
Right, yeah.
You had no choice. So, I mean, even Miyazaki-san himself said that Shadow of the Colossus was, if we didn't get Shadow of the Colossus, we wouldn't have Elden Ring.
Right.
And same thing with Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild is very
Mm.
much a Colossus-like. I think it's interesting how people are use the words like roguelite or something like that, but they won't call open world games a Colossus-like, where you
Yeah,
have
the
the
open world thing is interesting because I feel like there was a couple like the other thing that happened was that World of Warcraft had a big effect on
mm,
PC game development, and you know the the RPG, the first person RPG had existed in some form, like Daggerfall was like a massive
mm,
world, like it's the biggest Elder Scrolls world that's ever existed. It's mostly procedural. You should fast travel everywhere in that game because you're just walking through geometry for 20 minutes to get to the next town or whatever. So there had been large open world games, but then something is like a confluence of the the consolification of first person games where you'd get, games like I feel like
Oblivion or
Oblivion I think was
more
incredibly
yeah.
like in one way it was incredibly influential. In one way it was like it was obvious because like you had Arena, Daggerfall, and Morrowind, and then they did their high fantasy one around the same time as Lord of the Rings, right? But
Uh,
I think it had a massive I think Lord of the Rings and Oblivion together had this really big effect on the market mostly because we've been talking a lot about how like stuff that's influenced developers, but I think in terms of the market, I think sort of mainstream acceptance of that type of fantasy literature and worlds, and then you see like I feel like even D&D sort of starts to benefit from this a little bit later, but like I feel like fantasy games like that were so niche, and now fantasy is such a common genre in video games that like everyone plays it out batting an eyelid. But like, oh, you play those games, do you? You know what I mean? Like that was the effect for a long time, and I think Oblivion. I think that and Lord of the Rings, because it was around the same time, had a really sort of like, I don't know, it just made it more acceptable or something
hmm
to have media in that fantasy world. And then more fantasy games start popping up all over the place.
Which game would you say is the most that you would consider to be art?
Oh my lord. Oh my lord. Oh my lord. That's so hard. I because there's stuff that like affects me like personally,
But that's what art
but
is meant to do. It's meant to speak to you. It's your interpretation of it.
that's true. And there are solo games I suspect over the years. I wish I had considered this a bit more before we came on, but there are probably like games that I've played that have had a personal effect on me. But I think the games that had the most that I consider art are the ones I find it very difficult to, and maybe it's a byproduct of the work that I do, but like the effect that games have on a wider group of people is like really important to me. And I almost get more joy out of that. Like in the same way that like I enjoy sports, not necessarily because of how good the athletes are doing, but because of how the audience feels because of it. Like I'll watch loads of sports and I'll always go for the underdog. I'll always go for the local hero. You know what I mean? I have my team in football, in soccer, Arsenal, it's been my club since I was a kid. But like most sports, I watch and I just want the joy in the audience. And so when I think about games that had that type of effect on people, and to me that is like that has to be art. Like that has to be like it might not be artistic in the sense that I was watching The Thin Red Line last night, right? Terrence
hmm
Malick movies are very artistic, and they're in lots of different ways you can sort of look at it and analyze them that way. But how games have affected people is such an important part of that for me for whatever reason. There's probably a different word for it, but so when I think about that, I do think about games like even Animal Crossing during COVID. Like that's such a beautiful thing that happened there, where it helped people. Or I think of Among Us, or I think of like Dwarf Fortress is definitely up there for me. The games that I enjoyed the most over the years, I don't necessarily consider them. They're artistic in some respect, like Half-Life and Half-Life 2 are my two favorite games ever. And I was really lucky to be able to produce a bunch of documentaries for Valve over the past few years about the history of those games and how much work went into them and the art that went into that. And then you can pick out games like, Shadow of the Colossus or Eco or,
Yeah,
games that
Eco,
are like
such a big one.
so aggressively making some type of statement. What games do you think of? Because maybe that'll
Oh,
shuffle
definitely,
some.
definitely, Eco Shadow of the Colossus and The Last Guardian. I cried like a child at the end of The Last Guardian. I cried all the way through the 13 minutes of the Shadow of Colossus credits. I was like, you can't tell me it's
Oh,
over. Yeah, yeah. So I was there. That was the first game. Shadow of the Colossus was the first game I ever cried at.
right.
I think a game that not many people played, Papo.io, which was made by
Oh,
that game absolutely destroyed me inside because I went through that as a kid. And
did you?
so
I'm so sorry. Yeah,
it's but that's the thing, many of us did and nobody talks about it. And so
right.
when Vander Caballero, who I know, who lives here, he when he made that game, he didn't tell me what it was about. And he just
Oh
said,
my
I'm
God.
interested to hear your perspective. And I it was hard for me to finish it, but that is definitely art. Games like Grease for
Oh yeah,
sure. Spiritfarer. There's a lot of games where I look at it and when I have that sort of, I mean, I could say Witcher 3 because that game has such a profound fact, or I could say Elden Ring because of how see, I've played these games for 600 hours, or Warcraft because they have had that profound effect on me. I do, and obviously I do think those games are art to a certain extent, but for my money, when it comes to thinking of a game as art, as as opposed to something that's pure enjoyment. I do look at something. It's a Breath of the Wild for me was also a very not.
Mm,
I didn't cry, but it was a very emotional, very evocative experience of that complete erasure of what I thought Zelda was about, and then exploring that world and running for my absolute life when I went, oh, what's over there? Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then you just start, running, going, oh, this is not what I thought it was. And then having to crawl back to what you think Link's life should be and recovering his memories and all that kind of thing. Those games for me are art and how we interact with them. What is one of your favorite moments in gaming? I'll tell you mine first. So one of my
go
favorite
for it.
moments when I was playing Castlevania Symphony of the Night when I was a kid, my friend Steven lent me the game because I didn't have it.
Thanks,
And
Stephen.
thank you, Steven. Steven, Rich, and I are still great friends. We still talk about games. We used to play Gauntlet Dart Legends together every weekend. It was great. My friend Josh, we played a Tech Tag tournament and we played Tekken 3, Twisted Metal 2 every weekend. But those were like amazing times for me. But the moment where I really felt games were magical was when he gave me Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I finished it and I gave it back to him and he goes, "What did you think of the Upside Down Castle?" And I went,
Oh,
what are you
funny,
talking about?"
funny. Yeah,
And
yeah.
and he said, "What do you mean? What are you talking about? How did you not find the Upside Down Castle?" And he said, "Nope." And he put it in the in the console. And we got all the way to the boss, and of course we put the glasses on, and the little ball shows up, and I went, "How was I supposed to know that?" And of course, we get to the Upside Down Castle. It's literally there's the giant werewolves of the Colossus. I went, "Whoa, this is amazing!" I had that moment that you'd hear like the Doctor Who music starting in the background, and like my eyes going, "Wow." That was really the first moment where I felt that games were because I always love games. I've got a couple speed runs on Kirby. I've got a couple speed runs on Mario Six Golden Coins. That was one of my favorites as a kid, Super Mario Land 2. And but that moment I had that epiphany of games are really magical.
That's amazing. I had mouth washing is one that just came up to me recently, just thinking about that. That was a game. I'm not sure if you've played that. It's an indie game, takes place on a space station, but the themes around addiction, I think, really
Mm.
hit home with me for sure. Um, one of the most beautiful games I have ever played that like affected me throughout, and then the ending totally floored me was Immortality.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
that like any game that like does anything that touches upon faith, or because I grew up Catholic, but then I sort of had a
An Irish
aggressive.
Irish epiphany.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Which was probably the most like traumatic period of my young life. Well, maybe not, but it was one of the most difficult times when your sort of entire belief system falls underneath you and all that sort of stuff. So any game that touches upon any of the mythos of that, or like even games like Blasphemous, like like I mean that game's artistic
Oh,
just because it looks like an
oh,
interactive Goya painting that you're
stunning.
you're
Stunning. The
inside of.
pixel art in
Yeah,
that game is unbelievable.
it's amazing. I think moments in games there is. You're talking about crying in games. The last time I cried playing a game was the end of Return to Monkey Island. Um,
Uh,
because the Monkey Island games are my first game I ever completed was Secret of Monkey Island. I was did it with my brother. I was super young. It took us like 3 months to do it. It was just so hard. I couldn't figure out what to do and all this sort of stuff. And then obviously that franchise had a sort of like any IP had a storied history of here's the one that the creator made, and then there was these spin-offs and this one, and but nothing was ever really as good as those first two. I liked a lot of the other ones, but like those first two, and then they made Return to Monkey Island, and we did a documentary on it with Ron Gilbert and a bunch of the folks who worked on it. And I mean, they're making a game that was basically his finishing of the trilogy, as it were, but in typical his form, because the first two games are based around the types of people a lot of those developers were when that game was coming out and how
right.
they played around and knew each other and saw the world. It's like all about like I'm going to be a pirate. It's like early developers. I'm going to be a game developer. So for them to make the third one, or for him to make Return, it was obviously going to be a lot about not just him finishing this, but also the amount of time that had passed and how we were all different. And like in it, like Guybrush's son is talking to him, and I have a daughter around that same age, and yada yada. There's all this stuff. And then the ending of the game, like, oh my God, I'm gonna well up now. The ending of the game is like this, I can't even. There's this moment where Guybrush like stops and looks at the screen, and it's like like all of the stuff has been resolved, and then it's like this was what it was all about, was like him and you know what I mean? And oh my God, I wept like
Guybrush is talking to
at a
me.
wake. It was like it just what happened when that moment happened, it like all came down. It was like, oh, I get it. Like I get what this is. It's all about just telling stories, like whether or not they're real or not, or what the secret of Monkey Island is. None of
The
that shit
secret of
mattered.
Monkey Island is you.
Was inside you all along.
Yeah.
Right, right. And it's like, and the thing is that is a moment that couldn't have been made without the 20 years. Like
Yes.
you don't get there. You can't just put that in a, in a game or a novel or a movie. You needed the person on the other end of the controller to have gone through a huge chunk of their lifetime for that moment to land. And it completely ruined me. I mean, I can't even talk about it now without welling up. It was so impactful. So it's silly that like you're like, oh, what are artistic games that impact you?
I
And you're like,
never think it's
oh,
silly.
this like
I think that's the purpose of games, is they are the only that games have now overtaken movies in a choice of interactive media. People now turn to
right.
games rather than going to films. And I think it's because of that. It is because of that interactive aspect. You are living an adventure, and you do have, as the ad said, you do live a double life where or you connect
Mm.
with characters in a certain way. It's that mixture of reading and movies, and that you control the story and you control the character. That is really, or you control what you're building, whatever type of game it is. You control that aspect. And that's why I think games are so powerful, the most powerful form of media, certainly today. So, Danny, we're at the end of the time. We could go on forever with this.
Oh.
I was actually going to ask you what you think your most overrated game is, but maybe we'll keep the flame wars for another time. Oh, I'll say my
Ooh.
most overrated game, and
Yeah, do it.
The answer is Skyrim. Absolutely.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I
Yeah, I mean it's Oblivion with a in a new place. So
It's a
why
worse
do you think
version
it's
of it.
overrated?
Just in general, the story just doesn't make any sense. So, for example, when you go to, I've played it, and when you go, they think, oh, you are Dragonborn. You are the only one who can do the things that you do. And so they bring you up to the temple, and suddenly there are 12 monks who can do exactly the same thing that you can do. You go, but wait a minute, you said I was special. Why are you telling me that I can do these things, but you can do them, but you're not saving people? That's a bit odd. And so again, like a lot of the like the story, obviously the whole point of Skyrim is that you make your own story in your own world. But it's not that the it I just in general I found the story very incomprehensible, and it just didn't make any sense. I also I mean the bugs, but the there's always a certain amount of jank with Bethesda games, but I just didn't find it as good as Oblivion, and I certainly didn't find it as good as Morrowind. And
Yeah.
I understand they were taking the series in a different direction, but I also am not a fan of the magic system, and I think that the combat is very silly and spammy. And again, I love that so many people love it. I love that people enjoy it, that they make their own stories in the world. It is just not something that I connected with. And I
Yeah.
think when you look objectively at it and you realize that the story doesn't make any sense, you go, eh. But
Yeah, the narrative stuff in some of those games has not been there. I've always enjoyed like the smaller loops or arcs, like the Dark Brotherhood. I thought was really good in Oblivion and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I feel like Skyrim is similar to the and Morrowind to a certain extent, and Oblivion is similar to the Mario Kart thing of like your first Mario Kart's your favorite. I do think there are strong Elder Scrolls games and weak Elder Scrolls games. Like no one's talking about Daggerfall or Arena in this conversation, but yeah, I think that twinned with the mods is probably why Skyrim ended up being so big, just because the mod Nexus mod stuff and all that worked really well, and a lot of kids who had never played those types of games before were suddenly able to like add Macho Man Randy Savage to the start of the game as the dragon and Thomas the Tank Engine and
Oh,
add
Thomas
in all
Tank
that
Engine
stuff. Yeah.
should be in every mod. Classic. But I think you're right, and I think that's why it is so, because those games are so moddable, and you can make
Hmm.
them to be whatever you want. People are still adding mods to Skyrim now. But definitely for me, one of my most overrated. I spent about 6 hours in three different sessions just going,
You're done.
this is not for me. Go on, Danny. What's your most overrated?
I don't know. That's a tough one for me. That's like, I would maybe say I have a bit of a problem with Destiny. I think those games
Oh, and
are
how they deleted half the game.
not even like that, like all the story stuff and the
The
de-dinklagification.
Dinklebot.
Yeah, I think I did a video on this on GameSpot years ago, and I sort of stayed true to it for that in Destiny 2, where like there were games that the way I was thought to think about this is that like when the MMO stuff happened with World of Warcraft, there was this desire to try and make first person MMOs. And a lot of people went large scale. They saw MMOs and they went, oh, what that means is a really big world. And so you had games like PlanetSide or Mag that were basically trying to make these really big population FPS games. And then
Hmm.
I think the game that was the most World of Warcraft was actually Borderlands, because what it did was it realized what people want to do is play with their friends and get loot. And like that is the loop of so much of World of Warcraft. So that ended up being like the sort of successful one. And then you got all these loot shooters. And then what happened was, unfortunately, in the same way that WoW is able to sort of, has all of these mechanics to keep you playing or give you rewards for coming back, like rested XP. Then you had a bunch of people try and add these systems to games, like these Skinner box variable ratio
Hmm.
schedule stuffs. And Destiny to me was the most one of those ever, because basically the only reason to play that game was to get better stuff, and nothing about it felt artistically interesting to me. It just felt like you were making a really high production value Skinner box.
Well,
Um,
it had a good story in the beginning, and I think the weapons were certainly very interesting, and a lot of the puzzles and the puzzle solving community in the beginning of Destiny 2, really.
You're right. I remember when all those like the new area would come out and there was all these interesting ways of
Yeah.
of getting through it. So that's the thing is like maybe I'm being reductive because I didn't play too much of it, but I was super cynical about Destiny because I was like, oh, I know exactly what Bungie are doing here. Like that's what they're trying to accomplish. And because I have such a like
Well,
recently I put
now people would think would agree with you. I don't think anybody would disagree with you now.
and it's
Yeah.
and a couple of other games try to do this type of thing in and it's just it feels to me like that's the retention stuff really makes me feel icky in a lot of these games. And yeah, so I feel like yeah, you're right. The tide did turn a bit on Destiny when there wasn't really much there when they kept sort of plugging away at it. But
When they
I,
deleted the game.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and like I find it hard saying game. I'm such a like grass is always greener or like every game is for someone, right?
I do
Type of
agree with you.
person.
I do feel that way also. I try to because somebody's playing it. And I was going to ask, I mean, you kind of answered it already, but I was going to ask, what game did you play that nobody's heard of? And so my answer is always Imagine on the Forsaken Kingdom. That
Oh
game came
man,
out on the 360. It was a Japanese game that was done by Game Republic, and it was unfortunately people just didn't play it, and because the English localization, the voice acting didn't really fit with the Japanese idea of the game should have
how
been.
funny.
So they made the giant very bumbling and happy, and a lot of people didn't really jive with that. And so it was it got very bad reviews just based on the voice acting. When really it was an amazing Metroidvania style game that had like a really cool day and night cycle and had a really cool battle system, and you can still play it, I think as part of the PlayStation subscription, but nobody played it.
Man.
And yeah, it sucks.
There was a really good indie game that came out when I was working at GameSpot called Cannon Brawl that I often go back to play,
That's
and
great.
it was like a cross between Lemmings and like Command and Conquer. It was like it's you can play it on Steam. It's really good. I've played it a bunch of times. It's basically like a tower defense map control thing where you control a blimp and then you're going around and trying, and then the waves of both armies are coming at each other. I adored that game, and it was one of those indie games that never took off. And I
Who
was like,
made
how did
it?
that? One I know who Teresa Derringer was the main developer on it. I think she was just doing it under her own name, and then another guy who I forget his name.
Oh, great. It's on
Um,
Steam. I'll get it. Oh, it's
it's on
also on
Steam.
Switch. Nice.
Is it actually on Steam or
Yes.
a Switch? I didn't know it was on Switch.
Yeah. But
There
yes,
you go.
there's Teresa Derringer's name.
Yes, and
Wonderful.
Pete
Wish list.
Anstat was the other guy. That's right. Yeah, yeah,
Yes, that's right.
yeah.
So it's Triple Gates Games Cannon Brawl for anybody who
I
wants to give it a
love this
try.
thing. I love Worms though. So like
Uh,
that's Worms. Like me and my
yes.
wife play Worms. That is our game. Our 1v1 game that we play. Worms is just brilliant. In fact, during the game actually that we ended up playing loads during COVID I had to close my studio, the No Clip studio, when COVID happened, and that meant that like my house had like six computers in it then because we brought all the
Lamp
machines.
party, lamp party.
Basically, we turned one of the my daughter was too young to have her own like big bedroom, so
Never too young to start.
we turned the spare bedroom into a LAN room and had three computers and a racing wheel set up in it, like a full cockpit for a race wheel that got sent to me one time. Um, so the game that me and my wife played for all of COVID was Age of Empires 2. We just like
Nice.
played AoE 2 over and over again. I always pick the Celts to it's a good time. We had a great time. We played 2v2 against like the rest of the AI and like hunker down in one corner of the map and just make a bunch of cannon boats and then go destroy. She'd work on like food, like she'd work on like all we'd have trading posts. She'd do all the agriculture. She was really good at that, and I would do all the war stuff. And we'd like protect each. She'd protect me and feed my army, or I'd protect her and she'd feed my army. It was great. So
That's fantastic. Danny, is there anything else that you would like to tell people what you're working on next? Well, obviously, everybody's here because they already know you. But what are you working on coming up next?
We have our whole 2025 slate pretty much wrapped up, except for one game, which I'm keeping quiet for the moment. But the next project we have out is we're doing a bunch of stuff. We have a short video on Battlefield 3 single player campaign coming out soon. But our next big projects are Disco Elysium, which we've been working on for a couple of years now.
Oh boy.
We also did, yeah, exactly.
Oh
We
boy.
also spent some fun time in Sweden with a certain studio that are good at making games where you kill Nazis. So we have sort of two documentaries, one about their old Nazi killing game and one about their new Lucas-inspired Nazi killing game. Then I have a short video about Quake 3 coming out as well, and then we have a really big Cyberpunk series that's going to come out
Yay.
in December around the time of the game's fifth anniversary, would you believe?
Oh
We've been
God.
filming that we've been filming that for at least 2 years, five locations around the world, 30 interviews. It's a pretty big. So like this is what happened of the development of Cyberpunk, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So yeah, that'll be out later this year as well.
Can't wait. No clip forever, and the other no clip channel
Yeah, we're going to be turning that
asterisk.
into something in the next little bit. So yeah, we have a second channel that's I'll tell you that we're turning into like a larger games coverage outlet with a focus on doing mostly highlighting what I was saying before, indie and undiscovered games, and also doing previews for games. Sure, we'll have some probably big AAA stuff in there, but also adding the sort of no clip production value to games that never get that type of coverage. So like indie games, sure, but also these undiscovered games, these games made by artistic developers in parts of the world that don't get attention or whatever. We're gonna bring our cameras and do that type of stuff. So it's a way of sort of like changing the conversation around games coverage and how we should cover them and the types of games that get covered. Because it seems like I don't know, seems like coverage is screaming out for something like that at the moment.
So if you want to support Danny, please go to the No Clip Patreon, which is Patreon/NoClip, I think, and give your money to a very, very worthy cause. because especially preserving games culture and how games are made is very important in cultural history. Because as you know, with history, we do tend to lose a lot, and it's
Mm.
important to document things. Danny, thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. I really, really
Thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
me. It was a great lot of fun. Let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Anytime you want to come back, you are more than welcome to talk about games or Irish mythology or whatever you want to talk about.